I thought I had it all figured out. I was 31 years old, working in a high-paying corporate job in Boston, living the dream, or at least that's what I told myself. I had a beautiful apartment in Back Bay, a thriving career, and a comfortable life I had worked for. The American dream, right? But on one cold December morning, everything came crashing down. My inbox pinged with a calendar invite urgent, a 9 a.m. all-hands meeting. That was it. 45 minutes later, I walked out of the office with a cardboard box in my hands, severance pay, and no health insurance. The company I had given everything to had let me go. I had nothing left. That afternoon, I sat on the cold concrete steps outside my office building, staring at the space where my future had just evaporated. I was supposed to feel angry. I was supposed to feel betrayed. But all I felt was numbness. I thought about calling my mom, about asking her for advice, or maybe just comfort. But the truth was, I had never been good enough for her. I had worked harder than anyone else in my family, clawing my way to success. Yet it never felt like enough. The corporate world had promised me everything, and in the end, it took it all away. I didn't know what to do. I had no savings left, and the rent for my Boston studio was due in just 9 days. The $48,000 I had worked so hard to save over 8 years was gone, the last of it spent on my mom's second round of cancer treatments. I had no job, no money, no idea what the future would hold. But then came a call from my dad. "Cass, come home tomorrow. We might have something that could work. Just come home," he said. I didn't ask questions. I packed up my things in a single evening, not knowing if I would ever return to Boston. I threw everything I had into my Honda Civic and started the long drive back to Burlington, Vermont. The next morning, I was standing in front of the building that had been my grandmother's tea shop, Harper and Daughter's Tea Room. It had been closed for years. The windows were grime-covered, the awning sagging like a forgotten memory. The faded sign barely hung from the wall, half obscured by years of neglect. My father handed me a heavy key ring. "If you want to fix it up, it's yours," he said, his voice steady but tired. I wasn't sure what to think. How could I turn around a business that had been dead for so long? The place smelled like mold and dust. The ceiling tiles were hanging down like broken teeth. "We can't sell it. We can't keep bleeding money either," my father continued. "But if you can fix it up, you can run it. No rent, no paperwork." My mom, standing quietly behind him, added one condition. "You've got 30 days, Cassidy. 30 days to get it open. After that, if it works, you can stay as long as you need. If not, we'll have to move on." 30 days. I was in shock. No one could rebuild a business in that amount of time, right? But I was desperate. I had nowhere else to go. So I made a decision. I agreed to their terms, shaking my father's hand in the empty space. My parents' expectations were low, and so were my own. But I knew that failure wasn't an option. I had nothing left to lose. I called the bank that afternoon and opened a new business checking account. I transferred the last of my savings into the account, $48,000, then immediately began making calls to contractors, electricians, and plumbers. I started by asking for favors from anyone who owed me a debt. The work started the next morning. By the time night fell, I realized that this was my only chance. I couldn't go back to Boston. I couldn't return to a life that had been stripped away. For the next 30 days, I lived in the very shop that was falling apart around me. I set up an air mattress in the storage room and ate cold takeout while overseeing the demolition. I worked 18-hour days, tearing down walls, clearing debris, and hiring a crew that worked around the clock to restore the building. I was doing the impossible, with nothing but sheer willpower. I knew it wasn't going to be easy, but the thought of walking away wasn't even an option. By day 5, the place was barely recognizable. The team had ripped out the old carpet and sagging ceiling, exposing the raw walls. The space was dark and chaotic, but something inside me refused to let it defeat me. I had made up my mind. This was my chance to prove not only to my family, but to myself that I could do this. I could turn my life around. By day 7, the floors had been replaced with white oak planks, giving the space a warm, welcoming feel. The kitchen was taking shape, and the marble countertops were being installed. It was starting to look like a real cafe. It was on day 14 that I realized how much I had invested in this, physically, emotionally, and financially. Every dollar I had left had gone into the business. There was no turning back now. When my parents showed up on day 16 to see the progress, they seemed proud of what I had done, but they didn't say anything. There was a strange tension between us, like they were waiting for something to happen, and when it did, it came out of nowhere. By day 17, things were moving faster than I had ever imagined. The cafe was coming to life. The vintage tables and chairs I had found on Marketplace were restored and set up, the neon sign was glowing in the window, and the smell of freshly baked croissants and scones filled the air. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever created. I had already made a name for myself in Burlington, though the people who truly knew me really knew the weight of this struggle. And I thought this was the moment I would prove everyone wrong. I was ready. I had done it. I was about to turn my life around. But nothing prepared me for what happened next. Exactly 7 days after I opened the cafe, my brother, Landon, came walking through the door with his girlfriend, Skylar. Landon, my older brother, had spent the last 2 years in Los Angeles chasing a dream that had crumbled into nothing. The music producer career he had wanted so badly had fallen apart, and now here he was back in Burlington like a ghost of his former self, ready to be rescued. I could smell the desperation on him the moment he walked in. His hair was longer, bleached at the tips, and his clothes looked like they hadn't seen a washing machine in weeks. He stood by the pastry case, scanning the room like he had every right to be there. "Nice setup, Cass," he said with that lazy grin of his, the one that always made me feel like I was about to be manipulated. I wiped my hands and walked over to him, trying to hold back the irritation that bubbled up in my chest. I was too tired for this. I had built this place with my bare hands. And now, here was my brother, back from his failed attempt at stardom, expecting things to just fall into place for him again. "Yeah, Landon, it's a real dream come true," I said, my voice thick with sarcasm. Landon didn't seem to care. He just grinned, waved Skylar over, and slouched into the corner booth like he was already planning his next move. The audacity of it hit me hard. He'd been gone for 2 years, and here he was, acting like everything was just fine. By the third day, he was there every afternoon, lounging around, talking to my baristas, offering unsolicited improvements to the cafe. He started measuring the storage room with a tape measure he'd found in Dad's garage. He sketched out floor plans on napkins, suggesting I turn the storage area into a vocal booth or protein shake bar. I couldn't believe it. "Are you serious?" I laughed the first time he showed me the plans. "This is a bakery cafe, Landon, not a recording studio." But he wasn't joking. And that was when it hit me, their plan wasn't just about helping me succeed. It was about taking everything I had worked for and putting it into the hands of someone who hadn't lifted a finger. It was Sunday evening, a week after opening, when they decided to have family dinner to discuss the future of the cafe. I didn't want to go, but I drove over, hoping it might be a chance to finally relax, to let the stress of the past month melt away. I brought a bottle of Prosecco, planning to celebrate our first $10,000 week. When I walked in, I saw that the table was set for 5, but something felt off. Dad was already sitting down, his face tense. Landon had his feet up on the chair across from him, like he owned the place. Skylar was absent-mindedly picking at her nails, and Mom wouldn't meet my eyes. It was then that I knew. Something was about to happen. I just didn't know what. "We've made a decision about the shop," Dad said, his voice strange and formal. Mom slid an envelope across the table. The check inside was for $5,000. "We're giving Cassidy's corner to Landon," she said, like it was no big deal. The words didn't make sense at first. "What do you mean giving it to Landon?" I asked, my voice trembling. "You've done an amazing job, honey," Dad said, clearing his throat. "But Landon needs a fresh start. He's family, and he needs this more right now." I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. "You can't be serious," I whispered, my voice shaking. "You have 45 days to move everything out," Mom said, her voice cold. "We'll take care of the rest. Landon and Skylar need the space for his studio and some kind of business thing he's starting." The room fell into a dead silence. I looked at my parents, trying to comprehend what they had just said. I had poured everything into this place, everything I had left after my life fell apart, and now they were giving it away. I stood up so fast that my chair scraped across the floor. "You're seriously doing this?" I said, not even asking, but demanding an explanation. Dad didn't look at me. "It's already decided," he said, his voice hard. I looked at the check. $5,000 for everything I had built. $5,000 for the $48,000 I had spent on this cafe. The hours I had worked, the dreams I had fought for. I felt my chest tighten. There were no words left. I didn't stay for dinner. I didn't even take the check. I left without another word, my heart pounding in my chest. I drove straight to the 24-hour diner on Pine Street. It wasn't the kind of place I liked, but I needed to think. The next morning, I made a phone call. I had an appointment with Justin Coleman, a commercial real estate attorney I had found through a landlord forum. By the end of the meeting, I had a plan. "You've got a strong case," Justin told me. "Under Vermont law, everything you installed, everything you paid for is yours to take. You've got the right to remove it, as long as you return the premises to its original condition." I had never been more relieved in my life. I wasn't going down without a fight. Justin and I mapped out a 3-phase plan. Phase 1 was simple: documentation. I had everything I needed, every receipt, every bank transfer, every photo. All of it was going to be key to my success. Phase 2, removal. In 18 days, I would take back everything I had paid for the ovens, the marble counter, the hardwood floors, the neon sign. All of it would walk out with me. And Phase 3, the demand letter. Justin wrote it while I sat there, drafting a formal letter detailing everything I was taking and its value. I had spent $48,000 on this place. I was going to get that money back. And if they didn't comply, we would take them to court. The next few days were a blur of preparation. I didn't sleep much, barely ate. Every moment was consumed with one thought: take back what was mine. This wasn't just about a building or fixtures, it was about reclaiming my life, my work, my dignity. By the time I returned to the cafe, I had a binder, thicker than a phone book, filled with receipts, photographs, contracts, and everything I could find that proved I had paid for every last thing in that place. I wasn't going to let them get away with this, not after everything I had done. The first step was to document everything, and with Justin's help, I found the perfect photographer to take professional, time-stamped photos of every installed fixture. This wasn't just a personal vendetta. This was a legal process, and it had to be airtight. I was meticulous. I took photos of the ovens, refrigerators, the marble counter that had cost me a small fortune, even the neon sign with my name on it. Every piece of equipment, every little detail was logged. It felt almost surreal standing there, watching the photographer take picture after picture, knowing that I was gathering proof of what was rightfully mine. Phase 1 was underway. By day 5, the removal process began. I had hired a team of professional movers who specialized in restaurant equipment. These weren't the kind of movers who would break things or leave them behind. They were experts, and I needed this to be done right. The first crew arrived at dawn, and it felt like a military operation. There was no time to waste. The team worked efficiently, stripping the commercial kitchen of every piece of equipment. The ovens came out first, followed by the refrigerators and freezers. The marble counter, which had taken days to install, was carefully removed. I watched it all with a quiet sense of determination, refusing to look back. Every time an item was taken out of the building, it felt like I was taking another step toward my goal, toward showing my family and myself that I could reclaim what was stolen from me. Landon and my parents didn't know what I was doing. They thought I would cave, that I'd just walk away with the $5,000 and forget about it. They had no idea what I was capable of. On day 9, things took an unexpected turn. My father showed up at the cafe while the movers were still pulling out the last of the kitchen equipment. Landon was with him, filming everything on his phone like he was documenting some kind of crime scene. "Cassidy, what the hell is going on?" Dad's voice was loud, his face flushed with anger. "You can't just take everything. This is our family's property." I stood in the middle of the cafe, watching as the last of the appliances were loaded onto the truck. I could feel the tension in the air, but I remained calm. "This isn't just your family's property, Dad," I said quietly. "This is mine. Everything here is paid for. Everything I've worked for. You can't just take it from me." Landon's eyes widened, and he stepped forward, trying to block my way. "Don't make a scene, Cass," he said, a sneer on his face. "This is just business. We're helping you out. Don't you get it?" I shook my head, my heart pounding in my chest. I had never been this close to losing control. "No, Landon, this isn't just business. This is my life. And you don't get to take it from me just because you failed at yours." Dad looked at me with frustration in his eyes. "You're making a huge mistake, Cassidy. We're family." I took a deep breath. That's the problem, Dad. Families shouldn't treat each other like this. It wasn't easy, but I had made my decision. I wasn't going to let them manipulate me anymore. This was about more than money. It was about taking a stand, about showing them I was worthy of respect, even if it meant standing alone. By day 12, the last of the cafe's fixtures had been removed. The space was empty now, cold and barren. There were no more ovens, no more marble counter, no more neon sign. It was as if everything I had worked for had vanished. But the reality of it hit me all at once. I had taken back what was rightfully mine, and there was no going back. I stood there, in the empty cafe, and realized something important. I wasn't walking away from this without a fight. I had invested too much of myself into this to just let it go. I called Justin again. "It's done," I said. "Everything's out." He was quiet for a moment before replying. "Good. Now it's time for phase 3. The demand letter." A few days later, the demand letter was drafted. It was formal, precise, and to the point. It demanded payment for everything I had removed, calculated with interest, depreciation, and the cost of lost business during the 45-day shutdown my family had forced me into. The total came to $82,000. The letter was sent to my parents, and I waited. For the first time in months, I felt like I had control of the situation. When they received the letter, they didn't respond immediately. In fact, they ignored me for over a week. I couldn't believe it. How could they just pretend like nothing was happening? But that wasn't the worst part. On day 14, I received the phone call I had been waiting for. It was my father. His voice was shaking with a mixture of anger and something else, fear. "They're not going to pay," he said, his voice tight. "But I'll offer you $15,000. Take it and walk away." I felt my heart stop. $15,000 after everything I had done, after everything I had given up. It wasn't even close to fair. I thought about it for a second, then replied coldly, "No, Dad, I'm not taking the offer." I hung up the phone, knowing that this was just the beginning of what would become a legal battle that would change everything. The following weeks were a whirlwind. Every moment, every decision felt like it carried the weight of my future. I had made my choice. I wasn't just fighting for a building or for the equipment I had installed. I was fighting for my identity, for my worth, for the recognition I had never received from my family. This was my stand. As the days ticked by, the demand letter from Justin's office sat unanswered. But I wasn't going to let up. I wasn't going to back down. I'd spent too long working in the shadows of everyone else's expectations, and now I was carving out a space for myself. I was no longer the little sister who could be dismissed. I wasn't the one who could be brushed aside and made to feel small. The morning of the 21st day arrived, and I stood in front of my parents' house. The letter I had sent them was now a public record. It had been filed with the Vermont Superior Court. My heart raced as I walked up the front steps and rang the bell. When my mother opened the door, she looked at me in silence for a long moment before she stepped aside. "I need to talk to you," I said, my voice firm but controlled. Inside, my father was sitting in his chair, the same one where he always sat, reading the morning paper. He didn't even look up when I entered. "I know you've had time to think about everything," I said, looking directly at them both. "But I'm not walking away from this." Mom, still avoiding my gaze, said softly, "Cassidy, you don't have to do this. We're family." "Family?" I repeated, voice shaking slightly with a bitterness I hadn't felt in years. "You don't get to use that word now. You chose Landon over me, and I'm done pretending it didn't hurt." Dad finally put the paper down and met my eyes. His face was pale. "Cassidy, please," he said, voice rough. "This is about Landon's future. He needs this." "Needs it? Or wants it?" I asked, unable to hide the resentment. "Landon failed in LA, Dad. He came back with nothing but excuses. I built this place from scratch. I made it work. And you're gonna just hand it over to him without even considering how much I put into it?" My mother's voice cracked as she spoke. "Cassidy, we just thought you'd understand. We thought you'd walk away. You've always been the strong one, the one who can make it anywhere. You'll be fine." I took a deep breath. I am fine. I'm better than fine. But I'm not walking away from what's mine. And I'm not going to be pushed aside anymore. This isn't about money, and it's not about a cafe. It's about self-respect. It's about you respecting me. The room was silent. and I could see the weight of my words sink in. Dad's face flushed with anger, but something in his eyes shifted. Maybe he saw that I was serious. Maybe he realized he couldn't bully me into silence anymore. By day 25, the court case was moving forward. I wasn't just fighting for my cafe anymore. I was fighting for my life, my dignity, and my right to choose my own future. The legal papers had been filed, and my family was now facing the consequences of their decision. The amount I had demanded, $82,000, was the fair compensation for everything I had lost, not just financially, but emotionally. The hardest part wasn't the court hearings or the constant back and forth with lawyers. It was the silence from my family. They weren't talking to me. They weren't responding to my calls or messages. I couldn't help but feel the isolation creeping in. But in some ways, it was a relief. I had spent so many years trying to please them, trying to be what they wanted me to be, that I had lost sight of who I was. It was on day 30 when the judge finally issued the verdict. My parents had missed the court deadline. They hadn't paid the money I was owed, and now they were facing a breach of contract suit for unjust enrichment and conversion. The total was now $82,000, plus court costs and statutory interest. When I received the news, I felt a strange sense of finality. This wasn't a victory, this was justice. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the moment I had worked toward. I had won. It was over. But it wasn't just about the money. It was about what came next. 6 months later, Cassidy's Corner 2 was thriving. The new cafe was bigger, better, and everything I had dreamed of. It was in a prime location on Pine Street, and this time, nothing was standing in my way. I had more staff, a bigger kitchen, and a rooftop patio. We broke every sales record in Burlington within the first year. Kendall, my best friend since middle school, was managing the front of the house. She had been with me through the darkest days, and I knew she was just as invested in this dream as I was. We were a team, and together, we were making this happen. I had found peace not just with my success, but with the fact that I had finally walked away from the toxic relationship with my family. Mom tried to reach out once, sending me a handwritten letter, full of apologies and tear-streaked ink. I read it once, then threw it away. It wasn't about forgiveness anymore. It was about boundaries. Landon posted something on Facebook, calling me out for choosing money over family, but his words didn't bother me. I blocked him immediately. The truth was, blood might be thicker than water, but it wasn't thicker than self-respect. I had learned that the hard way, and it was a lesson I would never forget. The cafe was my life now. It was mine in every way, and I wasn't going to let anyone take it away from me again. As I stood behind the counter, pouring a cup of tea for a customer, I realized something important. I had built this. I had fought for it, and I would never let anyone make me feel small again.